Happy Monday, LSU fans. We join you here, and we appreciate you joining us. My name is Bryce, going alongside Glen West after a perfect Texas swing for the LSU Tigers on the diamond. Glenn, it was it was a fun trip to Frisco. I know we all got to kind of watch the Dallas Baptist game there in Arlington at the Rangers Stadium, which, and talking with some people, even talking with some players, they were like, that was just a really cool experience in terms of playing in a major league ballpark. But just in terms of the week, man, I mean, I know we're going to kind of dive into the nitty gritty, what we liked, what can be improved, what could we nitpick. But I just think overall, and look, D1 Baseball just came out with the rankings. LSU, the new number one in the country, Tennessee number two. A lot of great back and forth on the Twitterverse about that. But just, man, from a 30,000-foot view with what you were able to kind of take in and what you were to look, I mean, pretty successful week. And like Jay Johnson said, they had a plan, and it felt like they accomplished what they wanted to do.
Yeah, I would say probably from my 6'10" point of view, it was a you couldn't have asked for a better weekend results wise. I mean, to go 4-0 on the road, beat a top 20 team in Dallas Baptist, a Kansas State team that has some really good wins under its belt already. You go in there and you get up early, you're able to kind of win that one in a little bit more of a back and forth, I guess, in terms of them matching what you were doing, and then to win it in extra innings, I thought was a really impressive win. And then to win wire to wire, from that Sam Houston perspective, we can nitpick the pitching a little bit there, but you get up early and you're able to hold that lead from the first inning to the ninth, and I thought that was a really good positive sign. And then the Nebraska game on Saturday, you get down early, 5-0, you're going to get hit in the mouth some this SEC play when the schedule turns around. So for them to come back and score 10 straight and on the Saturday game, offense really seemed to be clicking for most of this week, which was a really, really good sign if you're looking ahead to what they got coming here in SEC play. So really liked what I saw from the offense. Obviously, the defense is something we'll talk about a lot more here going forward, but I thought from a execution standpoint and from just a mindset perspective, LSU they were about all the right things this last week, and I'm sure Jay Johnson echoed a lot of that in the press conferences with you guys. And you get the feeling that this team is starting to hit its stride a little bit, and they've found some kind of preseason. They kind of knocked off some of the preseason rust and are really starting to flourish at the right time of the year.
Yeah, and Glenn, one thing that I just thought was just a reoccurring theme in the post-game pressers, and obviously it's something that Jay had talked about with you and a lot of other reporters kind of in the preseason portion, fall and everything, was coming into 2025, and it's no disrespect to the 2024 team, but he knew things had to be different. And I think that in terms of the selflessness of this team is something that really stands out. I mean, Josh Pearson talked about it last night. Jay talked about it. You've got guys that are, they're not getting mad when they don't play. I mean, especially in the outfield, when you've got, three different versions of an outfield you could throw out there and be pretty successful. But it's the rooting each other on. And I even asked Josh Pearson about this last night. I said, look, a lot of times when you go into your first big road trip, and this is really true, not a true road trip, but your first road trip of the season, it's a chance to really build chemistry because, hey, you don't have the distractions of being at home. And he did laugh afterwards about, we don't have the distraction of Mardi Gras back home. We didn't have the distractions of all that other kind of stuff. You're with your teammates in the hotel. It takes you a little bit back to, your travel ball, your high school days of just playing with your brothers and playing with your friends. And that was one of the big things that I think they left this weekend with, was a sense of self, a sense of identity of who they can be. And I mean, we can talk about this for a second before we dive into the actual games, Glenn. I think one of the biggest thing, and Jay reiterated this, they can beat you in different ways.
Yeah.
Glenn, the defense was superb at times. I mean, you could just pick a day and name a play. I mean, the flip play from Dickinson to Milam, the relay from Josh Pearson from Milam to Hernandez. I mean, I know you watched them a lot more than I did last year and in previous seasons. When that's an impressive trait that really, I think, just puts another notch in the belt of how good this team can do, and it's really a balanced effort, it feels like so far.
Yeah, I mean, the highlight plays you mentioned there, I mean, that one on Friday was just insane. I mean, the throw that Milam made to have it, like, right there on the money for Hernandez to make that tag. I mean, if that had been half a foot either direction or if it had been a half second later, like, that's a walk-off win for Kansas State. And we're talking about a little bit of a different weekend,
Yeah.
I think, for LSU. So the fact that they were able to make those plays, and I think what's really standing out to me is that they're making the easy plays and they're making the hard plays look routine as well. I mean, that's really, really impressive for this defense. And we haven't always seen that the last 3 years of the Jay Johnson era. Certainly there's been, good, solid defense made. I mean, that 2023 team was a good defensive team. They didn't make a ton of mistakes, but, certainly there's been some times where they've also been a little bit more inconsistent. And I think this year what you're really seeing is that they've kind of they've hit all the right they've hit on all the right cards. Like they've done a really
Yeah.
nice job of finding the pieces of where guys should be. I mean, Stephen Milam at shortstop was not something that I had expected coming into the year. When we go back to the fall, I thought, he was a star at second base. Why not keep him at second base? But they
Yeah.
really liked what he can do defensively, and despite him being maybe a little undersized for the position, quote unquote, what he does is he makes everything look pretty easy out there when it's hit in his vicinity and in his general direction. And he just has such a smoothness about his game on the infield that I think is really impressive. And then Stanfield and Curiel are gonna kind of hold it down outside in that outfield. And I thought Josh Pearson, when he gets those opportunities, he's looking really good from an outfield perspective. Jake Brown can certainly be thrown into that mix as well. I think they've kind of found a lineup here that I think is really, really intriguing. I mean, I think going back to even opening weekend when Pearson was in the opening day lineup and then he wasn't in the lineup on day two. We talked about it that next weekend, like that next Monday on
Yeah.
that first pod of this regular season. It's like, I just think that when the going gets tough for LSU and when the schedule really, really gets hard, there's just no way that that Jay Johnson's not going to turn to Josh Pearson and put
Yeah.
him in the lineup. And you saw this weekend what that can do. It paid dividends. I think his batting average is now up around 350. He gets on base a
Yeah.
ton. I mean, he was, I think, 6 of 9 at the plate. He scored 7 times during the weekend. Very deserving MVP of that weekend. So yeah, look, I think that they've settled in on some things here that are really intriguing as we go forward. I think Hernandez is definitely the guy at catcher after this weekend and the performance he had on Sunday at the plate. You look at Ethan Fry and what he did from a DH perspective. I think he's somebody that's really going to have a lot of opportunities coming up in his direction, and gives LSU some added power. That was one of the bigger questions about this team is what kind of power are they going to have behind Jared Jones or after Jared Jones. And not a lot of people said Ethan Fry, just because I don't know what we really expected from Fry after he was injured for so much of last year. So
Yeah.
he's somebody to certainly keep an eye on. And I'm just really impressed by the way that they kind of handled themselves, not only defensively, but at the plate as well. I thought they were really consistent in both of those areas, which allowed them to win all 4 of those games.
We got the chance to talk to each of the opposing head coaches, and kind of staying in the same vein of talking about the offense. All 3 of them, in their own way, mentioned that LSU's lineup 1 through 9, like Sam Houston State's head coach said, that's not normal. Like what they have the capability of being able to do to you 1 through 9. And look, Glen, I think a guy that uh, I like to talk about a lot. I think he's one of a player that I think can be really good and had a great weekend was Chris Stanfield. I mean, in that 9 hole, just turning the lineup over and just finding different ways to get on base. I mean, I don't think that with him, it's not necessarily going to be the sexiest thing in the world in terms of getting on base, but he's going to find a way to put pressure on a defense. You believe that Braswell can continue to come along because he batted 300 in SEC play last year. That's what he was able to do. But, going back to some of the core pieces of what you mentioned, this was really funny. LSU's baseball data Twitter account, I think, had to stay pretty busy this past weekend. But, you looked at what Jared Jones, 8 of 19 on the weekend. Stephen Milam, 8 of 20. Daniel Dickinson, 7 of 18. Curiel in the leadoff spot as a true freshman against better competition, went 7 of 15. Curiel got on base 5 times twice. Dickinson had 6 RBIs. Milam had some really big hits. Bear Jones, look, I think we just assume, he's going to sit there in the 2-hole, and I love the idea of him in the 2-hole, honestly, from an analytical perspective of what when you look at lineups and how they're based nowadays. But Glenn, the exit velocity that he put on the baseball, both in Arlington and in Frisco, I mean, even his outs were loud. And I think that, they're seeing the ball really well right now. They're taking great at bats. And kind of going back to what the opposing coaches said, they said it's just different. They really make you work for it. They are not going to be over aggressive. They're going to make you play their game. And I want to caution before I start comparing this year to last year, Glenn. But even at this juncture of the season, there were some early signs of offensively they can go for some serious stretches without putting pressure on an opposing team. And look, for the game season's first 15 games or so, that's really not the case. Like they feel like they're gelling very well offensively and putting some pressure on opposing defenses.
Yeah, I mean, in 3 of the first 4 in 3 of the 4 games they played last week, I mean, they had more walks and hit by pitches and strikeouts as a group. I mean, just very, very disciplined at bats and just doing a really nice job of moving the offense forward. And you're seeing them doing it in a number of ways, whether it's just getting the first guy on base via free pass and then you bunt a guy over to second, or a pass ball gets a guy over to second and you just bunt a guy over to third, and you kind of just generate runs in that way. Because so many of these guys are, so to your earlier point, so open to just doing whatever they can to help the team and help LSU win these games. And so I think that's extremely important as you look ahead in kind of the gauntlet of SEC play that LSU will be facing. And having those guys that are understanding their roles this early into the season can only get better. Like, I mean, like it would be one thing if they came out and they were just inconsistent in all areas and you didn't really have a good feel for how guys would handle certain situations. And I think offensively they've answered the bell. I mean, after that loss to Omaha, this really has looked like a different offense over the last 4 or 5 games now. So they've done a really nice job of figuring that stuff out. Jay Johnson seemed very confident right before they left for the trip last week that they would be able to figure those things out on the road, and they were able to do it. I mean, they hung up a lot of runs this last weekend. 12 against Sam Houston. I think it was 10 or 11 against Nebraska. 8 against a very solid Kansas State team, and then 7 on a DBU team that's ranked top 20 in the country. I mean, that'll play in every SEC team you play this year. But if you put up those kinds of numbers consistently, you'll win those series. So, I just think offensively they're in a really nice groove right now. I think that there's still room for them to improve as well. So like there's been really good movement in that respect.
And two, I mean, I even tweeted about it at the time. I said, if you wanted something to nitpick, go to the Sam Houston State game. Bases loaded, nobody out. It didn't end up hurting you, obviously, but Jay said multiple times we could have run ruled them. We could have put that game away and gotten out of here earlier. And that's something that you always look for areas to improve. I guess the good thing if you're an LSU fan is that you can talk about areas to improve while winning. That's always where you can want to be talking about rather than the other side of the spectrum.
Yeah, even in that Dallas Baptist game, I mean, they scored 7 runs, but they also left 15 guys on base. Like, I mean, like there are areas in which this team can be much, much better than what they're already showing, and they're already showing to be a really, really good offense, and that's really encouraging.
Flipping it over to the pitching, and I'll start it with this. Jay did say that by Sunday afternoon, they had kind of exhausted where they wanted to go in terms of pitching options. That's going to happen to you when, dating back to when they played Nicholswood on Monday night, I think it was. You're playing, you're getting close to almost like a professional schedule, like with how they had to do it. Look, they're going to play 5 games this week, with 2 against North Dakota State, and then you're going to play the weekend series. So the pitching, let's start with what happened in Arlington and Connor Ware. I mean, Glenn, there's so many impressive young guys. Connor Ware, to me, though, his emergence, and it's still early. I think it gives Jay more confidence in what's going to happen on the weekend when you have a guy that, hey, midweek's fine. Like if we can throw him in the midweek, that's awesome. And if for some reason we need to move him to the weekend, you're liking the results you're seeing here early on. So I know that was the game you kind of watched and you covered. So just your thoughts on Connor Ware, and then obviously going back to what you saw. I mean, you could talk about, and I say this, I love Zach Cohen Cowan in his role, like as the piggyback guy to get you to the late innings. I want to shout out Cooper Williams, but then Kason Evans is just a dude, and we can talk more about him. But just kind of starting with what you saw against Dallas Baptist, maybe your thoughts on that pitching staff and Connor Ware's emergence.
Yeah, Ware was somebody we'd heard a lot about going, back to the fall, about just how much the staff really liked him and how much they thought he could contribute. And I didn't get a chance to see him a whole lot this off season. I saw him maybe once or twice, going back to the fall in the preseason scrimmages. So to be able to watch him now for a couple of midweek games, he has dominated those teams. I mean, he was well into his outing. I think he was 7 or 8 innings total, and he hadn't given up a hit in between the 2 outings, and he retired pretty much everybody that he'd faced except for one batter. I think he'd walked one, but outside of that, he went like the first 7 innings of his career at LSU without allowing a hit or a run or anything like that. So just very consistent. I mean, what he does, I think, really well is just his pitches have a lot of movement to them, especially the fastball. I mean, his fastball gets up to 94, but it's got some nice run to it. He did throw a lot of balls. I mean, he got behind in some counts, but he was able to battle back in a lot of those situations and didn't walk anybody. Like, he went 6 strikeouts, no walks in that game, and he only threw. He threw 60 pitches and 35 of them were strikes. So 35-25 split there. Between strikes and balls, you'd like to be that to be a little bit higher, I guess, in an outing like that. But just really great poise, composure. I think he's got a really nice curveball. He has a nice changeup as well that plays off those fastballs, and so I think for him, it's just going to be about continuing to fine tune the placement, the ball placement. But he's absolutely a guy that LSU, if they need to, make a move in that weekend rotation. And I'm not saying they're anywhere close to doing that. I mean, I think we're going to wait and see how the rest of these weekends play out before SEC play. But you're right. It's just a great feeling that I think Jay Johnson must have, knowing that if we do need to make a change, we've got this guy right here locked and loaded and ready to go if we need to throw him on a Friday, Saturday, or a Sunday. So really impressive stuff from Connor Ware. I thought what Evans did, the freshman, after that, he's going to be an absolute stud. I mean, like, he's just any big time game that you throw Kason Evans in this year, I think he's going to be able to slam the door shut on a rally, on a game, like just to close it out. And he's just been lights out, and he did that again over the weekend when they went to him, closed I believe it was the game on Friday, right? Did they throw him again on Friday? So they went
2 innings on Friday.
So they went a Wednesday game and then a Friday game. That's 2 games in a row where he closed the game out for him and just did a remarkable job. So LSU needed to play Tennessee tomorrow, and they were in a 1-1 tie going into the 9th inning. I think Kason Evans is the one getting the ball. He's been that good for him, and I think that we saw a little bit of the freshman bugaboo with Cooper Williams there with a couple of balls, and he just wasn't able to find the strike zone there. I think Maverick Rizzi had a little bit of that trouble too in the Sunday game that he played most of his action in. So there's going to be some growing pains with the freshmen. I'm not saying they're going to be lights out every time, but the fact that they're still going to these guys, in these high pressure situations shows you how much confidence they have in them and how critical they're going to have to be for this bullpen to be a real strength for LSU this season.
Yeah, it's something we talked about all offseason, right? And the chatter on the message board was really, hey, they've got arms. How's it going to pan out? And, man, if you can hit, especially in year 1 for a lot of these guys, if you can hit in year 1 of that, you'd mentioned depth. Like, when you get into May and June, Hoover, and you get to, a regional, that is a luxury to have. Like, guys that you can count on, you're going deep, where not many people have that. LSU, still way too early to say if they truly have it, but they have the opportunity to have that with a lot of the guys we've seen so far. And you mentioned, obviously, I wanted to talk Kason Evans just for a second. Went 2 innings on Wednesday and then 2 innings on Friday, Glenn. And I think that just speaks to his versatility and how they he's not just a 1 inning guy, max effort, let me get out of there type of thing. This guy threw 4 innings in 3 days. Like
They stretched him.
that's
Well,
impressive.
he was one of the guys they stretched to be starters, if
Yeah.
you'll recall, and so, he should be able to have some of that stamina to be able to go twice in 3 days, and I think what they did last week was they tried to see if a guy like Connor Bench could go twice in 2 days, and maybe that he wasn't quite ready for that.
Mhm.
I wasn't able to watch the games as closely as you did. Was there anybody this weekend that kind of had to go twice in 2 days or had to come in and went multiple times out of the bullpen that performed well, or was there maybe still a little bit of hesitancy to do that this weekend?
Yeah, so there were 3 guys, or technically, I guess we could say 4, including Evans. So I'll start there. We mentioned him earlier, Maverick Rizzi. He went, 2/3 of an inning on Friday, did give up 3 runs, and all those were earned, and then struggled a little bit on Sunday with the command. And I think that's just what you kind of talked about, the freshman growing pains for him. I still think that's a guy they want to be able to count on there later. And then obviously you have a guy that I think a lot of people may have kind of forgotten about if you're the casual LSU baseball fan, and DJ Primo, who, got a big out on Friday, literally faced one batter on Friday, and then on Sunday had a massive clean inning, Glenn, where he faced the minimum in 1 inning, sat him down in a row, and kind of stopped that Sam Houston run where they had 4 consecutive innings where they scored, and he put an end to that. So you had Primo that did that 2 in 3 days, and then the final one was, and I'll throw Zach Cowan in that. I mean, he went on Wednesday and then went again on Saturday, pitched multiple innings, but you kind of expect that out of a guy like Cowan who has a starter background there as well. But that seems like kind of the core. And then I'll throw Connor Benj in there as well. Benj went an inning and a third on Sunday and then went an inning and 2/3 on Friday. So to your point, you're starting to see some of these guys that Jay said, okay, there's probably like 3 or 4 guys we feel comfortable throwing multiple days on a weekend. Maybe it's asking too much if you can get that up to 5, or if Maverick Rizzi, he hones in on what he needs to do, he becomes that like 4th or 5th guy. That just, man, that's a luxury, like I said earlier, to have multiple guys that can go multiple different times in different spots on a weekend there as well. And I know a lot of people have been asking about it. We hadn't even talked about Gavin Guidry. Like if he's able to come back and provide another guy who you would believe in, obviously you got to see, his situation, his health, and obviously getting ready to go. But that's a guy that all healthy, you believe in to go multiple times on a weekend. So it just adds to the depth, I think, of this rotation, this bullpen, Glenn. That was impressive. And then kind of playing off of that, William Schmidt, with an emphatic slamming the door on Nebraska on Saturday in front of a sold-out crowd. I think that's another guy that, depending on his comfortability and his growth as a freshman, you could see emerge as a day guy on a weekend. And it depends on the matchup, stuff like that. Yeah, but as well. But I mean, got starter background there as well, Glenn. I mean, I think that's the biggest thing, right? Like you've stretched so many guys out that you feel comfortable. Hey, we're going to throw you for 2 innings on Friday. You're down on Saturday, but maybe on Sunday we might need you for an inning and a third, inning and 2/3, or something like
Yeah,
that.
well, I mean, Schmidt started the Southern game last, or
Yeah,
no, so he started them. Maybe it wasn't the Southern game. Maybe
Nichols.
it was the Nichols game. Yeah, the Nichols
We've had
game on
47
Monday,
games in a week,
and
so yeah.
and he threw 60 pitches in that game too. So like they, Monday to Saturday there was a good amount of rest after going 60 pitches in his first start as well. So yeah, look, I think that there's, when the schedule finally is able to settle down a little bit for this staff, and they're not playing 5 games in 7 days, which I'm sure Jay Johnson doesn't really love doing a whole lot of in the non-conference. But when specifically when conference play gets here, they'll be able to stretch it out a little bit more, get the guys that need the reps to go on those midweek games. And I wouldn't be surprised if eventually we settle into a situation where like the starter in a midweek goes 2 innings max and they just throw a whole bunch of guys. I think what they tried to do here these last couple of weeks is, because they've had 5 games, they've tried to have, a guy go 4, 5, 6 innings early in the week, just to kind of help preserve some of the bullpen for later in the week. So I think when they're only playing 4 games, or when they're only playing one midweek game and then a 3-game SEC series. I would be shocked if anybody in the midweek is going more than 2 or 3 innings in a midweek. So, which is good because I think it gets a lot of guys involved and keeps a lot of arms kind of warm for the weekend. And if somebody shows some consistency, then they might be the first ones they go to out of the bullpen on a high pressure situation. So. I just glanced at the stats here. It didn't look like they did a great job in terms of a command perspective. They had a lot of walks, especially in that Sunday game, as those arms, as you mentioned, kind of teetered a little bit. They kind of ran out of gas. So this is obviously going to be a huge day, huge recovery day for LSU, just to kind of get back to Baton Rouge, rest up a little bit, and then get back in the swing of things because they've got, like you mentioned, another really long weekend ahead of them. It's going to be at Alex Box, so that's going to be good. But Tuesday, Wednesday, mini series against North Dakota State, and then a 3-game series against Northern Alabama. And this is kind of the final big week before they gear up for SEC play. So you want to see them continue to take those strides and in every single facet of the game. And I think that this team is, like I said at the beginning here, I think they're hitting their stride at the right time. And they definitely have an easier – they get eased into the SEC schedule a lot better than they did last year. I mean, last year was just Jay Johnson's spoken about it.
Mississippi State, A&M, like it was crazy.
They played Tennessee, Arkansas, like all their really tough opponents right at the beginning of the schedule. Yeah. And, now it's kind of more towards the middle is where their real kind of high pressure situation in the SEC is. So we'll see kind of what happens, but I'm sure they're a lot more happy with the way things broke this year as opposed to the way they did last year from a scheduling standpoint.
Yeah. Real quick, I want to hit on the starters because we talked a lot about the bullpen. I thought Cade Anderson, Glen, was masterful. I mean, he obviously, had a couple command issues early, but then, just made two pitches. And the 2 guys that hit the home runs were good. Like D. Kennedy was on my all-tournament team, the kid that hit the home run from the right side. He's a good baseball player, third baseman for the Wildcats. 10 strikeouts. Anderson was the starting pitcher of the weekend in terms of that all-tournament team there as well. And look, we can talk Chase Shores. I mean, it's kind of the same thing we've been kind of talking about. Like, it's just a command aspect. Does he need to take a mile per hour too off to really feel comfortable getting where he wants to? And that's a good conversation. But I would rather spend more of the time talking about the turnaround that Anthony Ianson performed because, Glenn, I tweeted that almost got ugly. Like, in terms of that start on Saturday against Nebraska, the Cornhuskers were feeding off momentum. Like I said, it was a sold-out crowd, over 11,000 attendance, and Nebraska traveled well. So it was a first true type of you can hear the other crowd getting into it a little bit more for Ianson. And Glenn, the Joker, I think, struck out 6 of like 10 to kind of, on the back half of that outing to completely change the narrative, but also knowing that you've got an offense that can hit the ball and is hitting the ball well, kept the team in the game. I mean, Jay said it. He goes, 5-0's nothing for this offense, but you combine that with what Anthony did, and that, he says, I think that's just what catapulted us through, obviously the back half of that game. And I don't know how much you actually got to kind of watch of it, but man, just looking at the box score, you kind of think, okay, what did the start look like? And then you kind of break down what happened in the game. Like, that turnaround it's very different than last year. I'll say that. Like, in terms of being able to hold the rope, battle through something, and come out on the other side and leave with a win. I thought Ianson's performance was very, very intriguing and a cool storyline that we could follow the rest of the year.
Yeah, no, I agree. I didn't get a chance to see a whole ton of it, but he from what I saw settled in really nicely after a bit of a hiccup there. I think I did see more of the Anderson and Chase Shores starts, and I think for Shores, the biggest thing for me, like the first 2 weeks, like command wasn't an issue for him really. He did a really nice job of commanding all of his pitches, and so this was the first game where I think you could really look at it and it was like, okay, well, is this going to be an aberration or is this going to be the start of a trend? And I think if I know Chase Shores and we've gotten to talk to him a bunch over the last couple of years, he's going to be right back in the lab and working on making sure that this is a one-off and not something that's going to continue for him. Anderson, couple weeks now in a row where he's gone really strong for 5 innings. 6th inning has gotten away from him a little bit. I'm curious to see what kind of adjustments he's going to make. Is that something that he talked about, or did y'all get a chance to talk with him after that start? Because that it is now, I think, 2 weeks in a row where he's gone really 5 innings of great baseball, and then the sixth inning, it's gotten away from him a little bit, and they've had to make a change. But I think he's somebody
Yeah.
that they need to go a little bit deeper than just 5 1/3 innings or something like that. Like they need the Friday guy to go 6 7, ideally once SEC play gets here.
Yeah, funny enough, Kansas State's head coach said that he felt like the key was just seeing him for a third time. Like that
Okay.
was the difference, and that happens. And then Cade, actually, we talked with Cade on the field before the second game, and obviously he's out there and the turf's on, the tennis shoes. He knows he's not pitching, signing autographs and stuff like that. And kind of asked him, he said, "Yeah, I just kind of felt like." They made some adjustments, and that's going to be the next step that I have to take with Yeski. Is like that third time through the lineup when they've had a look at me 2 times, and in turn, like I know what's worked. That's going to take me from being what I feel like I'm a good pitcher to like a great pitcher. And I thought
Yeah.
that was pretty spot on, like in terms of
Good.
what
Yeah,
we've
it's great
seen, like what you
analysis.
talked about.
It's
Yeah,
great.
like
That's
like
exactly
what
what you
you
want to
said.
hear. Yeah.
Yeah, like what you said in terms of just the third time through the order, it's slipped. That's kind of has seen a trend the past couple of weeks. And obviously, like I said, you get back in the lab. But no, that was Cade's response. And look, you've talked with Cade, I've talked with Cade. I think that's a pretty well versed young man in terms of understanding his craft and what he's doing. Same with Chase Shores and Ianson as well, who just battled and kept competing. And I think that we can kind of round it off here. I think that was kind of the story of the whole weekend. They just kept competing. Like even when they got down as a team, they kept competing, and that was something really cool to see. Last but certainly not least, Glenn, Josh Pearson is omnipotent. He's everywhere at once. You have banged the gavel. The fact that he's gonna have to be in the lineup like at some point. And I just wanted to give you one last chance to talk about it because I mean the guy. I think from a scouting perspective, nothing he does is like elite in terms of metrics. He just plays baseball and he's just super consistent. And that has to mean something. And I think this weekend was just another great example of that.
Well, I think the one thing that he has that really nobody else on this roster does have is he knows what it's like to play in those huge, huge games. I mean, like he was
Yeah.
a core piece of that championship team a couple of years ago, and uh, he was really a mainstay in that lineup for the last several weeks of the season. And so when you get those reps under your belt, and when you played for as long as he has at this level, that's just something that I don't think you can teach these younger guys. And look, Jared
Yeah.
Jones has been around the program; he's seen it. Uh, but he hasn't actually been in the middle of it yet. I don't think to the degree that a guy like a Josh Pearson has, and you just want people like that in the lineup. And
Yeah.
you want guys that are going to go up there, know their roles, take good swings, get on base. I mean, he did it every way possible. I mean, I think he drew more walks and hit by pitches than he had hits this weekend, and like he was on base a ton. So like,
Yeah.
he's somebody that Jay just has the utmost confidence and trust in. And I listened to a couple of the press conferences after those games, and you can just hear the way that Jay talks about him. Like when the going gets tough for LSU this year, Pearson's going to be in those lineups. He's going to be at the plate taking big time swings and big time at bats, and they're going to need him to get through this season. And so that raises a lot of questions about kind of what LSU does with the outfield and that
Mhm.
DH spot. I mean, that's something we've been talking about now for several weeks, but these were the most important games of the season to this point, and it's no surprise to me that Josh Pearson was a huge reason why LSU walked away, undefeated for the week.
Yeah. No, I'm with you. I'm with you there. And like you alluded to, Glenn, it's going to be a loaded another week of baseball coming up. As we were talking about, this is kind of the final weird week, we'll say. You're going to host North Dakota State for on Tuesday and Wednesday, and then North Alabama through the weekend. And then you kind of get into the normal flow of the one midweek game and then your SEC series starting next week, where Xavier will come to town. And then you host Missouri, which is, look, and no disrespect to the Tigers from Columbia, but it is, I think, a much more welcome opening opponent than Mississippi State or A&M or something like that they had to face last year, Arkansas. You'll do that, and then they'll I think the next big test, and I'm not saying Missouri won't be a test, is when you head on the road to Austin, and for your second SEC series at Texas. The Longhorns look pretty good so far this season, so it's going to be a fun SEC play, man. And I can't believe we're already in March. Like, it is just flying by. And that being said, you can tune in later this week as we spring football preview podcast. Spring practice starts this week. The first availability for us will be on March the 12th, so make sure you stay tuned to the YouTube channel. We'll have highlights, early footage of spring practice, some practice notes that I know Glenn has just been missing so much. Those spring practice notes where we just continue to vet out all the content in terms of what we can find in a 15-minute time period. But hey, it's our jobs and we love it. So it's a great
of
time to
20-minute sessions. Lots of 20-minute sessions. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Make sure you come join the Go 24/7 community. Great stuff on whether it's baseball, whether it's basketball, whether it's football, or anything in between. Recruiting obviously starting to heat up as well as we get closer to spring visit and official visit season this summer. So without further ado, make sure you subscribe to the podcast on all platforms, including here on YouTube. He is Glen West. My name is Bryce Koon, and we'll catch you next time here on the Go 24/7 podcast.